Well, you don't need one.
I'm coming back, so I'm not a distraction.
You go, Donna.
Who else said they needed one?
Huh?
Who else needed one?
Yeah.
Now, those extras are paying off.
There might be two there. No, there shouldn't be the same.
There you go.
All right, maybe they are.
And I'm heading out back way. I can give Jen one if you want.
Make sure they're not.
Really?
Hang on, you need two. There should be 2 pages.
Oh, okay.
2 different pages.
I think I only gave Shirley one.
All right. Did you get 2 different pages, Donna? In case you didn't, Donna, did you get 2 different pages?
Donna.
See if there's 2 different pages. One with a short back and one with a, yep, you got 2 different ones. Okay, good.
I'll tell you what. I'll give you these two. You give me that one back. It's like making change at McDonald's. There's that. There's that. And then I'll give you that. Oh, look at that.
See, I had them stapled, but then we ran out of time, so. All right. Well, hopefully mine are in order. All right, so we're starting the book of Numbers tonight, right? Everybody ready? We're going to do an overview, so we're not going to dump into the first chapter. We're going to dump through all 36 of them really quick. Right? We're not going to be here long, hopefully. But we're going to review a little bit. We're going to go backwards just so we know where we are. It's been a while since we've been in the Old Testament, right? So we went through Genesis, right? And Genesis, we know that Jacob's family has grown immensely. They're blessed. They're safe in the land of Egypt. There was a famine that brought Jacob and his family back together, right? And he was, at the time, the second in power, right? Under Pharaoh. Hey, Nathan, it's humming a little bit. And then the children of Jacob are protected and provisioned there, right? They have a bunch of provisions. They're doing well. They're doing great when that book ends. Then we move to Exodus, right? And it's roughly 400 years later in the book of Exodus. And that Pharaoh knows nothing about Jacob. And their prosperity, the Israelites' prosperity, goes from projection. What is it humming? Protection and provisions to persecution, right? So this Pharaoh, as I said, doesn't know anything about Jacob, doesn't care. He enslaves the Israelites because they're getting too big too fast. Maybe I'm too far forward, Don. Is that the problem? I'll scoot back some. I try to be down here with you guys instead of up there. But God raises Moses up. Them, which leads us to Leviticus, right? The book of Leviticus is about that 1 year span at the base of Mount Sinai. And if you recall, we got the 10 Commandments, we got the blueprints for the tabernacle, right? And despite their rebellion, God still has a covenant with them, right? And He also created the way for the people of Israel to live close to His presence. Right? They had the power, they had the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud over the tabernacle every day. So Numbers, that brings us to Numbers, right? Numbers is the 4th book in the Pentateuch. We get the name from the Latin Vulgate. It was called numeri. In the Greek is arithmio, where we get arithmetic from. The Hebrew title, Beth Mar, I think, if I said it right, means in the wilderness. So, and another name for the book is the Wandering, or the Wanderings. And like the name says, in the wilderness, describes much of the geographical settings that that book took place in. Because they wandered from Mount Sinai to the plains of Moab and across to almost to the Jordan River, right? Almost to Jericho. So the book of Numbers, as I mentioned, opens up at the Mount Sinai and it ends at Mount Nebo, overlooking Jordan. So an interesting fact as I was studying this book is the oldest found scriptures, not meaning the oldest scriptures ever. We know Job's the oldest book, right? But the oldest scriptures that were found or put together first was out of Numbers, and it was Numbers 6, 24, 25, and 26. And they say, and I find this interesting, that these are all blessings. Jehovah bless you and keep you. Jehovah make his face shine upon you and gracious to you. Jehovah lift up his face to you and give you peace. Those are the first Bible verses that were found. And that's before we had chapters and books and all that good stuff. So, moving on, the author of Numbers. Most Christian scholars believe Moses wrote the book, right? As well as the rest of the Pentateuch. And there's some reasons for this, but we'll find in Numbers as we do our verse-by-verse studies that Numbers 33:2 tells us that Moses kept a journal. So the Bible tells us the first 5 books of the Bible. Good question. And it's possible that a few portions of this book were added a little bit later on by scribes because they reference, or there's references to Moses' humility, unless he wrote that about himself in chapter 12. And then also there's some references to the book of wars of the Lord in Numbers 21. So maybe there was some scribes that helped, but Moses is given credit for writing that book. So the background, as I mentioned, this book is at Mount Sinai. It picks up about a month after the close of Exodus and with Leviticus as well. And it's about 1 year and a couple months after the Israelites have departed from Egypt. So they've been gone out of Egypt for 1 year and 2 months. The rest of Numbers, or the whole book of Numbers, handles that remaining 39-ish, actually 38 and 10 months, of the Israelites' stay in the wilderness. So it'll talk all about the wilderness and their travels. And that's from the Sinai to Kadesh to the plains of the eastern side of Jordan, as I mentioned before. The book of Numbers begins and wraps up at the stay at Mount Sinai, and that 38-year, 10-month wilderness to the promised land is where they're going to go. Now, in this book, there's a bunch of messages, a message and a purpose to this book. There's quite a few of them. And so the first one right out of the gate is the sovereignty of God. He's the principal character of the book. Jehovah is the principal character of Numbers, the God of Israel. He's sovereign over all the affairs of all the people and all the nations, and he makes it very relevant in this book. The presence of God. God's presence is seen by a pillar of fire and a pillar of clouds every day. Now, how many of you guys, I find this interesting. How many of you guys have ever experienced the desert or know about the desert? It's hot during the day in the noon, and it's cold at night, right? Well, isn't it a coincidence maybe? I don't like coincidences, but I think it's amazing that God leveraged a cloud during the day, centered over the tabernacle, right? But could that cloud have, I have no biblical way to prove this, but that cloud could have covered all of Israel to keep them out of the scorching sun. And likewise, the fire could have kept them warm at night. Just a thought. But anyways. God's presence is seen by the pillar of fire, as I said, and the pillar of cloud by night. There's the Ark of Covenant that represents the throne of his presence among the humility. And the mobile sanctuary demonstrates that God is not confined to any one spot, right? And that's true today. Another thing we'll find as soon as we open this book is in chapter 1, he knows the names of the people. He knows your name when he does the census. And this is telling us that God loves us and knows us and wants us to commune with him. So that's a very powerful statement right out of the gate in this book. The purity and the holiness of God is another message that's brought out in this book. God is holy and pure. He requires behavior, that same behavior for those that claim him as the sovereign king, right? God has, the next one is God in his revelation in this book. So there's some revelations that occur in this book. And Moses is the primary human that interacts with God. But we will find a donkey and a pagan diviner and get some messages out from a donkey. So we will learn something from a donkey in this book. Right? That's Balaam, yes. Yeah. We'll get to that. The uniqueness and exclusivity of God. God is of Israel, the one true God. Therefore, he's worthy of all of our devotion, right? Nothing else. And he deals severely with those in this book that do not. And that's around Numbers 23, 19-ish. I think I put that in your notes too. So there's little structures that happen in this book. Numbers reflects a very challenging message of faith or faithfulness. The Israelites, as we'll see through our study, are constant complainers and rebellers. There's a lot of challenges that they bring. But this book consists of 7 cycles that basically repeat. And we'll discuss those as we go through chapter by chapter. But there is a statement of historical setting. There's at least one of those. There's a reference to the 12 tribes of Israel and their leaders. Let me flip my page. And the matters related to the priests and Levites and the laws defining nature of faithful community. Right? Then I'm going to break this book down for you in 2 parts. So in this outline, there's the old generation and the new generation. And hence 2 censuses, so guess what happens? There's a census of both, right? So the first census and consecration of Israel, that's books 1 through 6. They then prepare and depart for the promised land, books 7 through 10. Aaron's rebellion of the priesthood, 16 through 19. The judgment of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. That's Moses' wife, by the way. And chapter 16 through 17. The duties of the priests and the Levites, that's chapter 18. The ordinance of the red heifer, that's 19. The Kadesh Plains to Moab, that's a travel section. That's 20 through 25. There's some rebellion and judgment against Aaron and Moses. Or rebellion, judgment of Moses and Aaron, I guess is the right way to put that. Chapter 20. The rebellion, the judgment of healing by snakes, chapter 21. Balaam is in chapter 22 through 24. And then we get to the second generation and the preparation for the new generation, right? The second census with the new generation is in 26 through 30. And there's some instructions for that new generation in 28 through 30. They the preparation of the promised land. They're getting ready to enter in 31 through 36. There's vengeance against the Midianites in 31. There's actually a battle. The settlement of the tribes beyond the Jordan is in 32. The journey from Egypt summarized. When we get to that book, you're going to see every spot that as Brother Don was talking about, and you write it down, you'll see how many places they stopped and how far they were from each other. And then the instructions for the division of Canaan, or the division of Canaan in 33 and 34. So that's kind of how when we break it down by the two groups, the old generation and the new generation. But now, let's talk about closer chapter by chapter and what's going on. We'll dive a little deeper here. And as I said, the book's laid out in stages of their journey. So you'll see that it starts out in Mount Sinai, as we talked about. That's chapters 1 through 10. The people are numbered. We have a large census. It takes about 4 chapters to go through that. It also gives us the laws around the camp arrangement. And we'll talk in detail on that because it's very depictive of future events. So there's a reason why each camp or each tribe is put in a certain location, and we'll discuss that. The laws around ritual purity, if I can say the word, is 5 through 10. And that's how they would make the camp holy and how they would be welcoming to God. Then there's a little travel section. So we travel to Paran in 10b through 12. And God basically lifts up God's cloud lifts from the tabernacle, as we know, right? It picks up and it takes off. So everybody that's responsible, like the Levites that were responsible for the tabernacle, tear it down and start the move, right? And all the other tribes do the same thing with their stuff, and they start to follow. Here's the thing. It's an 11-day journey from Mount Sinai to Jordan. And somehow, or for some reason, they stretch it into a 38-year and 10-month journey. If they walked it straight across on the regular trade route, it would take 11 days. So you ask me why? Anybody? Why? Okay. All right. Well, they start grumbling in chapter 11. They start complaining about what? Anybody know? Hunger. Yes, they do. They're tired of this manna. They want a cheeseburger or a steak, right? And they complain. And they complain some more. And Moses prays for them. And God does answer a prayer for them. They do get quail to eat. And they get an abundance of quail. But it still doesn't calm them down at the end of the day. In chapter 12, Moses' family starts to badmouth him in front of Israel. This spreads to even his sister and Aaron. These are the highest leaders, other than Moses, in the tribes, complaining. And God punishes Miriam with leprosy as she's turned white as snow, if you guys recall. For 7 days, I think? Something like that. We'll find out because we'll read through. In the wilderness, then they moved to the wilderness of Paran. There's no M. 13 through 19 is those chapters. And they arrive in this desert. This is roughly the halfway point. So God instructs Moses to send out the 12 spies or scouts or whatever you want to call them to scout the promised land. Anybody know how long they were gone?
12 days.
A little longer. Noah had the same type of time frame. 40 days. Yep. Usually means a long time in the Bible, right? And when they get back, the report is very interesting. It's in Numbers 13, 27 through 28. We'll read just these two chapters, or these two verses. But it goes on more, and we'll do it in a deep dive a little bit later. But They told him, who would be him? Moses, right? They're reporting back to Moses. Told him, Moses, and said, we went to the land that you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Now, a little bit before this, they're marching in with that big pool, right, with all that fruit on it. You guys remember that? Well, that picture of those two guys carrying that fruit is still used in Israel today for their travel ministry, their travel department. That's what they use. It's that picture. And then in verse 28, we get the nevertheless. Here's what the other 10 said, or the rest of them said. Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. Their cities are fortified, very large, and moreover, we saw the descendants of Enoch there. Anybody remember Enoch? Or the descendants of Enoch? They're all giants, right? They're all very large people. So they're scared. So 10 out of the 12 come back and say, in Numbers 13, 30 through 33, say, we can't defeat these Canaanites. And Caleb and Joshua are the only two that say, God will save them. God will deliver them. Right? So those 10 start a mutiny. They want a new leader. They want to do away with Moses. They want to go back to Egypt again. You know, they start complaining. And in chapter 14, 1 through 4, they complain for the safety of their children. It's not like God hasn't been taking care of them. Think about this, right? He's been fighting their battles for them, keeping them protected, giving them the cloud, the fire, the manna, everything they need. So they're using their kids as a scapegoat for the lack of faith. So I'm going to ask you, before we get to God's judgment here, who enters the promised land then? The children do. The children do. You are right. Because we're going to find that out. What was the result of God's judgment? Numbers 14, 27, and 30. God takes this, I would say personally, right? He commands Moses to tell him that anyone that was 20 years or older, and it was numbered, will die in the wilderness, except for two. Do you know who those two are? Yeah, Caleb and Joshua. Those are the only two. Yep, they brought back the good report. Yep. And if someone ever comes to you, I was telling Dawn this last night. I said, if someone ever comes to you and says God doesn't answer prayers, have them read chapter 14. Because they complained and prayed that they wanted to die in the wilderness. God answered their prayer. Right? All right. So then we move on to the laws on sacrifice. That's chapter 15. The rebellion of Korah. That's chapter 16 and through 19. Do you guys know that story? Anybody recall what happened there? This is the Levite. He's a Levite. And he gets about 250 other Levites with him. I'm going to give you the I guess, country version of it, right? That they basically said, we want the same power you have, Moses, and God can talk through us. And he doesn't just talk through you. And Moses basically told him, if God only talks through me, then this ground will divide up and swallow you whole and come back together. Guess what happened? It did. So God deals with them, right? And we'll deal with it. We'll read that verse by verse and understand what goes on too. So then we have some more travel, chapter 20 through 21. And guess what happens? What does these Israelites do? That's what they do. What are they complaining about here in chapter 20? They're thirsty, right? And God commands Moses to do what? He was supposed to speak to it, right? Did somebody say that? But he, out of his frustration, he struck it not once, but twice and said, what do we have to do? He put himself in the same category as God. And what happened to Moses for his disobedience? That is exactly, he got the exact same. Yep, he gets to look at it from Mount Moab. Yep, very good. Very good, Gage. Is that you over there with the answers? Maybe you do get an A+. All right. So, then in chapter 21, we have the bronze snake. Yet, what are the Israelites doing again? Complaining. God brings some wrath down on them in the form of venomous snakes. Starts biting everybody. People start dying and getting sick. Moses prays for his people. It's kind of a repetitive thing we're seeing here, right? He prays for the people, and God tells him to put this bronze snake up on a pole, right? And anybody that looks on it and believes with their faith that will be healed, right? Well, God, this chapter or this story tells us about God's ability to punish, right? He has the right to punish his people that sin, right? And against his commandments. But it also shows his mercy and his grace. Because God's judgment was transformed into life for anyone that believed in the healing power by looking at that snake. It was a faith statement. And if we go to the book of John, Christ says that too, right? I'll give you the hillbilly terms of it. But basically, Christ says, when I get lifted up, and those that believe in me will also be saved. We'll read it probably verse by verse when we actually do some of this verse by verse in Numbers. We'll probably pull that scripture too.
So you did that bronze snake, but it wasn't like an idol thing.
No, it was a faith statement. It was forcing them to be faithful, and believe. In the plains of Moab are the chapters 22 through 36. So we're going to finish the book now. So this is the new generation, right? Or getting there anyways. Getting to the new generation. Almost the new generation. Some are dying off. Balaam and the king of Moab, that's 22 through 25. So the king of Moab is not happy. This big, huge, large group of Israelites, about 3 million people-ish, are trouncing through his backyard. And he's not happy about it. So he hires Balaam to curse Israel. He pays him money, right? And I didn't know a whole lot about this guy. I wanted to do a little bit more research, and I found some interesting things out about what this guy is or who he is. But it is interesting that he's mentioned 59 times in the Bible. And that's more times than the mother of Christ or any of the apostles individually. Did you know that? Just an interesting fact. But who is this guy? Well, he was a Mesopotamian Baru, or an oracle priest and diviner, which basically means that he reads omens and tells you truths about them, right? He's a witch doctor, I guess is another way to put it, right? But what's interesting about this guy is he tries 3 times. Now, he's up on the mount of Moab looking down on Israel. Israel's encamped in the plains right by the Jordan River, getting ready to go across, right across from Jericho. And he's looking down, and he's going to curse Israel, and all he can do is say blessings. It's all he can do. And that's God's promise from Genesis 12 pouring out, right? That only blessings will be spoke about his people. God gives Balaam a vision for Balak, which is the king, of a future king of Israel that will rise up and bring justice to all the nations. That's fulfilling Genesis chapter 49, a promise that was there. So if we reflect on this book, or where we're at in this book, and we look down at what's going on, we're seeing God's mercy and grace fulfilled right before Israel's eyes, and they don't even know it. Because think about this. They're up there. Balaam is trying to curse Israel, and God's protecting them yet again. And what are the Israelites doing down here? They're groaning and complaining and carrying on yet again, right? So they're doing their thing. But God's showing the grace and mercy that he has. And this will become emphasized by the prophets and even the New Testament writers. That these stories, they'll show in their writings how much grace God was pouring out on that location. So then, chapter 26 through 36 is the next generation as they prepare to get into Israel. We take a new census in chapter 26. It's 600, I just noted this number down. It's 601,730 people, and a net loss of 1,820 people from the original census. So they didn't prosper, they didn't grow, they stayed pretty much even keel. Chapters 31 through 36, the land is appropriated to the tribes. 2.5 of the tribes decide that they want to stay on the east side. That's the side not of Canaan, right? So that's still out in the wilderness, so to speak. But Moses commands them that they have to help the others in battle and settle their lands, and then they could come back. And in 32, they win some battles. There's a listing of the places, as we said in 33, all the travel spots. The boundaries are broken up in 34. I'm going to try to hurry up here. In chapter 36, the book ends with a new generation at the Jordan River on the plains of Moab, overlooking Jericho, and poised to move into the Promised Land. That's 40 years later from the time they left Egypt. And basically, we're setting the stage for Moses' last sermon, which is Deuteronomy. Right? All right, questions? We had a few while we went through. Everybody fill out their questionnaire? Everybody get the answers? Where do we get the book of the... We'll go through them real quick so everybody's got the right answer. Where did the book of Numbers get its name? Well, that's about the census. Yep. But it got it from the Latin Vulgate. And its name was Numeri. But it was for the censuses that are in the book. You are correct. What was important about these censuses? That was part of it. But what was the main reason we had to take a census? Who was protecting Israel the whole time up to this point? And what were they being instructed to do? Go into Canaan and fight battles. They needed to have a military army ready to go.
That's why from each one, they had to get everyone that was 20 and above.
Mm-hmm. Yep, 20 and above that was able to serve in the army. Yep. Where's the book open up at? Very good. Who's the author? Yep. How long has it been since the Hebrews left Egypt? Very good. Gage is going to get the A+. 1 year and 2 months. Somebody did their homework. How long has it been since the Hebrews... Oh, we just answered that one. How long does it take the Hebrews to travel to the Promised Land? 38 years and 10 months. Very good. Very good. And who's the main character? No, he is not the main character. Jehovah specifically. Yes. All right. Anybody got anything else? Who wants to close tonight? Don't everybody jump up.